Well, Tim, some experts say it's due to a shift in grading after the pandemic as teachers become more lenient, which has led to big repercussions.
And I think schools have been hesitant to tell parents that their that children are still behind.
For years, Thomas Kane, a researcher and Harvard professor of education, has tracked learning nationwide. And recently, he found teachers have become reluctant to give students low grades. A line of thinking happening nationally at a time when students are struggling from lost learning and making it difficult for parents to notice a problem.
Even in the fall of 2022, only 9% of parents reported that they thought their students had lost ground and were worried that they would catch up.
A recent study by the Education Recovery Scorecard shows Oregon elementary and middle schoolers are 3/4 of a year behind in math and 2/3 of a year behind in reading. And some experts worry inflated grades make it harder to recover lost learning.
Those things become permanent because students aren't pushing themselves to the limit to try and overcome those losses.
Tim Daly is the CEO of Ed Navigator, a nonprofit that connects families with medical providers to navigate educational needs. He says grade inflation creates higher absenteeism too.
Students are missing more school and performing worse on assessments, and yet many of them are still getting A's and B's, which are higher grades than they received before.
Though not all experts agree.
The truth is, there's not a lot of firm data on grade inflation, if it's even a thing.
Madhu Narayanan is an assistant professor of educational leadership at Portland State. He says while there is learning loss, grades have always fluctuated based on a multitude of standards.
There's never been this hard ultimate reality of what a grade represents.
And Narayanan says districts need to answer one key question at the heart of the issue.
Should their grades go down if learning loss goes down?
All right, guys, so we got to talk about a story that I would say is positive news, okay? Because one of you guys messaged me on X a couple days ago and said, hey, man, I have a request. I would like for you to cover a positive story, right? I want you to start talking about positive news stories. And I said, okay, I will try to be more positive with some of the news stories that I cover, okay? But, I mean, to be quite honest with you, most of the news is negative for the most part, okay? I mean, the chaos that's happening in this country, there's so many problems, there's so many issues to address and talk about that, you know, sometimes I find it hard to find a story that is purely positive. But I think this story is positive for the most part, even though, you know, it is kind of negative in the sense that we have to talk about education in this country, which is a disaster, like most things in this country. And part of the reason why it's a disaster is because of the Democrats and their pandemic era policies of forcing kids to learn remotely. Okay, this has resulted in kids falling behind in reading and math, and they're performing worse than ever, which is a really, really, really bad sign for the future of this country, because the future of this country is based off how the youth is doing. And I gotta say, I don't have much faith in our youth because, quite honestly, I mean, there's just so many problems, okay? I mean, you have this wokeness that has invaded school. They're trying to teach kids about gender and sex and race, and they're not focusing on actually teaching kids what they need to know, which is reading, writing, math, science. No, they're not trying to teach them the things that they actually should know. And again, as a result, I believe that the future of this country, America, as a number one nation, as a leading nation, is in jeopardy, okay? Because I don't have any faith in the next generation to lead this country because, quite honestly, we're graduating woke idiots, right? And that is a huge, huge, huge problem that has to be addressed, okay? We need school choice more than ever. And this is an issue that Republicans should talk about a lot more because we definitely need some radical change in order to address this issue. And a part of the radical change are teachers that stand up to some of these woke policies that are designed to allow kids to simply go to school and not learn anything, right? They don't have to prove that they can do reading, writing, math, or any of the basics in order to graduate, which kind of defeats the purpose of school. Essentially, school has become a glorified daycare. And again, that's not the purpose of public education. And this story right here involves a teacher out of Henry County, Georgia, that decided to stand up to the woke nonsense when she declared that, hey, I am not going to give kids unearned grades. Okay. I am actually going to grade kids based off what they've earned. Okay. If you don't turn in your work, if you don't do your assignment, if you get a question wrong or you don't perform well on the test, then you get the grade that you earned. Okay. And I am not going to give kids grades that they did not earn. Okay. This is what she said. And the school said, no, you can't do that. You need to give kids at the very least a 60, regardless of what they do, regardless of how they do, regardless of whether or not they turn in the assignment or they do well on the test or whatever they score. You got to give them a 60 at the very least. And she said no. And as a result, the school fired her. She turned around and sued the school, and she won. Now she's running for school board. Take a look.
A former teacher who sued her school district and won is really hoping for a victory at the polls. A jury awarded her damages after she says she was fired for refusing to give students grades they did not earn. Channel 2's Tom Jones is live in Henry County, where the former teacher says she feels vindicated.
She does, Karen. Sheri Mimbs says the jury agreed with her that she was let go from this school because she refused to alter students' grades. Now she says she wants to continue helping teachers make sure something like this happens to no other teacher. So she's running for a seat on the school board.
It was like a sigh of relief, a weight off my shoulders.
That's how former Cotton Indian elementary teacher Sheri Mimbs felt after a jury came back with a judgment in her favor after she was fired by the Henry County school system.
That's a victory for me. That's a victory for these teachers.
It all had to do with Mimbs' refusal to give students who didn't perform a set grade determined by the school.
I gave them the grades they earned.
Mimbs says back in 2017, an assistant principal wrote this note telling her not to give students grades less than a 60, even if they didn't turn in any work.
I went to the assistant principal about it, and she was like, yeah, you need to change those grades. Kids can't have less than 60.
Mimbs says after she complained, her contract wasn't renewed. So she sued and won.
I knew I was being retaliated against.
The jury ordered the district to pay her 6 figures in damages for retaliation. It has to pay her attorney fees and, most importantly, reverse her non-renewal, which she says was keeping her from getting teaching jobs. Now, after the victory in court, Mimbs hopes to get a victory at the polls.
I'm planning to run for school board.
Mimbs says she is happy she stood on principle and was rewarded for it.
Nobody can make me believe just giving out grades is helping any student.
And I asked the school system for a comment. A spokesperson sent me a copy of the judgment and said he had no further comment. Mimbs is running for the District 5 seat currently held by board member Mackenzie McDaniel. Jewel Richardson is also running for that seat. We're live in Henry County. Tom Jones, Channel 2 Action News.
Yeah, so I hope this woman wins, okay? Shout out to her, because she could have just went along with the policy and said, you know what, screw it, I don't care, right? I'm going to give these kids a 60, which I believe is a failing grade. I believe a 60 is an F. It might be a D, actually. I'm not entirely sure, right? But regardless, she said, hey, I'm not going to give kids a grade that they didn't earn, even if it's a 60. If you don't turn in your work, if you do bad on the test, then you get what you earn, which I think is the greatest life lesson that you can give a child, because once you become an adult, if you don't show up to work, or if you don't do your work, you're not just going to get by, right? Your employer is going to fire you, which I would assume would be the equivalent of a 0, right? That's the equivalent of a 0. You have to face consequences. You got to take that L. You got to take that 0, because if you don't take that 0, then how are you going to learn that there are consequences when you do not do the work, right? Because there are consequences like that in the real world, and students should experience that in school. And she could have just let it slide. She could have said, you know what? I don't care. I can't do anything about it. It's a school policy, whatever. She could have did that, but she decided not to, because she actually cares. She actually cares about students learning, okay? And she is one of the rare teachers that really do care enough to say, you know what, I'm going to stick with my principles. I'm going to stick by my guns, and I'm going to make these students earn every grade that they get. Because, again, we're passing students in these classes, and they're not learning anything. right? Again, in Oregon, they've essentially passed a policy to make it so, hey, students don't have to show that they can do math, read, write, to do any of these things in order to graduate. So again, what's the point of going to school? There is no point. And again, it's bad because these schools are a disaster. They're terrible. Okay, like this school right here, Cotton Indian Elementary School out in Georgia, Stockbridge, Georgia. Okay, look at this. Look at the data on this school, and this is from publicschoolreview.com. Okay, so it's not my data, but according to them, serving 569 students in grades pre-kindergarten through 5, Cotton Indian Elementary School ranks in the bottom 50% of all schools in Georgia for overall test scores. Math proficiency is bottom 50%, and reading proficiency is bottom 50%. The percentage of students achieving proficiency in math is 10%, which is lower than the Georgia state average of 36%. The percentage of students achieving proficiency in reading/language arts is 18%, which is lower than the Georgia state average of 39%. Yeah, so the Georgia state average is an embarrassment, right? I mean, 36%, 39%, less than half the students are proficient. That's an embarrassment in and of itself. But this school is even worse than that, right? This school is so bad, okay, that only 10% of students are proficient in math, okay? Only 18% is proficient in reading. So again, these kids can't do math, they can't read at grade level, but yet they want to give kids 60s, right? They want to inflate their grades. They don't want to fail them. If you can't read or write or do math, if you don't know the subject, if you don't know the material, then you should just be given a grade that you didn't earn, right? You shouldn't move on. You should not be allowed to move on. I think that honestly, it should be a requirement, right? It should be a requirement that if a student, unless they have a learning disability, an actual documented real learning disability, they should be required to perform at grade level before they're allowed to move on to the next grade, period. And if they can't perform, then they don't move on. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how long it takes. You have to be able to perform before we allow you to graduate or to move on to another grade level, okay? Now, again, if they get to the point where, they're 20 years old and they're still in 7th grade, hey, they can drop out. But we're not going to be handing out any diplomas. We're not going to be giving them participation trophies if you can't perform. I'm so serious. I'd rather the students earn what they get rather than to just pass them on and say, oh, well, we'll just, it doesn't matter if they actually know the material. We'll just, pass them on to the next grade. No. We can't have that, because these types of students are what hold back the students that actually are learning, the students that want to learn and that are performing at or above grade level. When you got the dummies in class holding everybody back, the teacher got to take extra time with them and stuff like that. It just makes it less efficient, right? Put the people, right, that don't know anything, the kids that don't know anything, okay, if they can't read at, grade level or whatever, or they can't do math at grade level, hey, they need to all be in the same class, right? Get that extra attention. So I'm just saying, I personally think that this is embarrassing, okay? It is embarrassing for a school to be this bad, but yet they're trying to inflate grades, right? They're trying to give kids grades they didn't earn. Minority enrollment is 81% of the student body, majority black, which is higher than the Georgia state average of 63% majority black. Now, hey, at the very least, they're in the top 20 most diverse schools. At the very least, they got that, right? It's a terrible school, but hey, there's some diversity. There's diversity, right? I'm just saying. Doesn't seem like the diversity is working out too well, in my opinion. So yeah, shout out to this teacher for actually caring, for actually giving a damn about students, standing by her principles and not giving kids participation trophies, not giving them grades they did not earn, and actually caring about them learning. Okay, and I'm glad she won her lawsuit, and I hope that she wins a spot on that school board, because these are the type of teachers that should be creating and making policy. The teachers that actually care about students learning and that are not just going to let students get by because, oh, well, we don't want to hurt feelings or we don't want to hold them back and all this nonsense that has come with woke education policies that have poisoned these schools. And as a result, we have kids that are graduating not knowing anything. And that is the most dangerous threat to the future of this country. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.